Good evening, everyone. Welcome to lecture 3 on animal kingdom. So in last lecture, we discussed about various bases of classification of animal kingdom. So there were various bases, characteristics on which the animal kingdom was completely classified. So basically, the animal kingdom was classified on the basis of symmetry, on the basis of different properties like segmentation, if segmentation is present or not, or on the basis of whether they have cellular level of organization, whether they have tissue level of organization, or whether they have organ system level of organization, whether the organisms belonging to a particular phyla are having true body cavity or they lack body cavity, etc. So in the last lecture, we discussed about the kingdom Porifera that include the sponges. And what are the basic features of the organisms that belong to kingdom Porifera? We discussed that. And we discussed about various other characteristics, like we discussed about water canal system, which is the predominant characteristic of the organisms that belong to the phylum Porifera. In today's lecture, we will discuss about the other phyla. So in today's lecture, we will discuss about coelentrates, and we will discuss about ctenophores. So, before proceeding to the particular characteristics of the organisms that belong to coelentrates and ctenophores, we will discuss from this diagram, we will try to understand that what are the basic characteristics of the organisms that belong to the kingdom Animalia and phylum coelentrates and ctenophores. So, basically, the organisms that belong to the kingdom Animalia are multicellular in nature. That is, they are made up of many cells, right? They are multicellular. Since they belong to the kingdom Animalia, they are mostly heterotrophic in nature, and that is, they cannot make up their own food. They are dependent on other organisms for their food requirement. And the organisms that belong to kingdom Animalia are eukaryotic in nature. We know that is, they have the cells that have the nuclei that is well covered with the nuclear envelope. So these are the basic characteristics of the organisms. Now we will see that what are the other characteristics of the organisms that belong to phylum coelentrate or ctenophores. So they have tissue level of organization. So what do I mean by tissue level of organization? So in tissues are nothing but they are a group of cells that perform the similar kind of function. So that perform the special function, that perform the similar special function. So tissues are those group of cells. So they have tissue level of organization and their symmetry is radial symmetry. So we have learned about the radial symmetry also in the first lecture, that what is radial symmetry. So radial symmetry involves the division of organism into two equal halves by any axis that passes through its center. So if this is any axis, we can get two equal halves, 1 and 2. If suppose this is any axis, we will get two equal halves. One is this half, one is this half. If suppose this is any axis that passes through the center of the organism, then we will get two equal halves. One is this and the other is this. So this is how, what do I mean by radial symmetry? That any axis that passes through the center of the organism will divide it into the two equal halves. So this is about the radial symmetry. So the organisms have the radial symmetry, and we also learned that what is the importance of radial symmetry in these organisms, because these organisms are mostly marine, right? They mostly live in water. And since they are surrounded by water from all the sides, they will experience, suppose this is an organism and it is made up of so that it is surrounded by water from all the sides. So the body should be made in such a way that it should be able to bear the force from all the sides. So the body is radially symmetrical, and this radial symmetry actually allows this shape actually allows the organisms to bear the force equally from all the sides, and therefore allows the helps in the maintenance of shape of the organism and also helps in swimming of the organism, right? So this radial symmetry, the symmetry is also based on the habitat and the habits of the organism. So in that way, the body is designed by the nature. So they have radial symmetry. Then these organisms are acoelomates. That is, acoelomates means they lack the body cavity. So the word A here represents the lack. That is, they lack the body cavity. So coelomates means they lack the body cavity. So coelom is the body cavity. Acoelomates are the ones that lacks the body cavity. So these organisms lack the body cavity. They do not have body cavity, and such organisms belong to the phylum Coelentrates, that are also known as cnidarians, or the phylum Ctenophore. So we will learn about Coelentrates and ctenophores today. But the basic characteristics of the organisms that belong to these phylums is that these organisms belong to the kingdom Animalia and are multicellular. They have tissue level of organization. They have radial symmetry. They are acoelomates and belong to phylum Coelentrates, which is also known as cnidarians and ctenophores. So we will first start with the phylum Coelentrates. So cnidarians, or also known as Coelentrates, are tubular or bell-shaped animals. So they may be tubular or they may be bell-shaped, like this. Right? They may be tubular organisms or they may be bell-shaped, that reside mainly in these shallow coastal waters. However, very few of them are fresh waters also, that reside in fresh water or in brackish water or in ocean forms. The term cnidaria, why they are named so? So why they are named so? Because they have a specialized cell, singing cells, which are known as cnidocytes. So these cnidocytes basically help the organism in the movement also. It helps the organism in anchoring also, in binding themselves to in helping them in attaching to the substrate. So the term cnidaria is derived. So this is important, that they have the cells cnidocytes, on the basis of which these organisms are named, right? So these organisms are named on the basis of the cells which are present, which is the cnidocytes. Each cnidocyte has a fluid-filled capsule, which is called as the nematocyst, right? So nema means thread and cystis means bladder. So they have so every cnidocyte, so suppose this is a cnidocyte, they have this shape of flagella-like shape that helps in the anchoring, and they have a fluid-filled capsule, which is called as the nematocyte. So this is the fluid-filled capsule which is present inside the cnidocyte, that is known as the nematocyst. So nematocyst, as the name suggests, thread. Nema means thread and cystis means bladder. They contains a long, spirally coiled hollow thread. When the trigger of cnidocyte is touched, the nematocyst is discharged. Right? So this is helping in the defense mechanism also. So this is helping in catching the prey. This is helping in the defense mechanism. So these are very important. That nematocyst, which is present inside the cell, is helping in the defense mechanism also. So when the trigger of the cnidocyte is touched, nematocyst is discharged out of the nematocyst is discharged, and this thread basically traps the prey. So it helps in trapping the prey, helping in the defense mechanism. And others have the spines that penetrates and inject paralyzing toxins. So the organisms that belong to these phyla are toxic in nature. They release toxins in order to have their defense mechanism. So as basically, some may release the nematocyst that traps their prey. Others have these spines that penetrates into their prey and inject the paralyzing toxins, leading to the paralysis of the prey and therefore leading to the defense mechanism. So this is very important, that the body of the cnidarians have two forms and they have two layered sacs. So they have two layered sacs. So the body of a cnidarian is a two layered sac, which is made up of two layers. The outer tissue is a protective epidermis derived from the ectoderm. We know that the organisms that belong to these phyla, that is the coelentrates, have only two germinal layers, that is the ectoderm and the endoderm. Right? Mesoderm is absent in these organisms. Mesoderm is absent. Mesoderm is not present. They only have ectoderm and endoderm. So the ectoderm, so the protective epidermis, which is the outermost layer, outer tissue layer, is derived from the ectoderm of the ectoderm germinal layer. The inner tissue layer, which is derived from the endoderm, as the name itself suggests, ecto means outer, endo means inner. So the inner organs of the organism are derived from the endoderm, while the outer protective tissue is derived from the ectoderm, right? So the outer tissue layer is a protective epidermis, which is derived from the ectoderm, while the inner tissue layer is derived from the endoderm, and it secretes digestive juices into the internal cavity, which is the gastrovascular cavity. Fine. So this is the gastrovascular cavity. Gastro here means the stomach, vascular means the vessels. So this is the gastrovascular cavity, in which is the internal cavity in which the digestive juices are being secreted. Digestive juices are secreted that helps in the digestion of the food particles which are being trapped, and they are mostly carnivores, so they mostly trap the small animals. So it serves for the digestion of the food and circulation of nutrients. So as the name suggests, it is a gastrovascular cavity, right? So gastro, stomach, it is used for the digestion, and vascular means for the vessel here, right? So therefore it is helping in the circulation of the nutrients. The fluid-filled gastrovascular cavity also support as a hydrostatic skeleton. So since the body is not organized into organ system level of organization, therefore most of the functions are performed by the tissues only, right? And the gastrovascular cavity is playing the role in the digestion, in the circulation of nutrients, and beside that it also acts as a support for the organism and therefore act as a hydrostatic skeleton, right? So it acts as a hydrostatic skeleton, so called because it offers some resistance to the contraction of muscles but permits the flexibility. So basically it acts as a skeleton because some of it, just like a skeleton, it offers resistance to the contraction of the muscles, but it also permits some flexibility, therefore it is hydrostatic in nature. So that is why it is named hydrostatic. Why hydrostatic? Because it is not very rigid, but it offers some resistance to the contraction of muscles. Like some resistance is being offered to the contraction of muscles, but at the same time it also provides some flexibility. So therefore it is hydrostatic in nature. And the tissue layers, the two tissue layers, that is the outer tissue layer, which is made up of ectoderm, and the inner tissue layer, which is made up of endoderm. So this is the ectoderm and this is the endoderm, right? So the outer tissue layer, which is the ectoderm, and the inner tissue layer, which is the endoderm, is being separated by a middle layer, which is the mesoglia, right? So this is the mesoglia. The outer tissue layer is the ectoderm, the inner tissue layer is the endoderm, and the middle layer is the mesoglia, right? So although they do not have mesoderm, but the tissue layer that divides both the outer and inner tissue layer is separated by the space, which is the mesoglia. One of the very interesting feature about the cnidarians that we will learn in details is that they have two basic body forms, right? So they have two basic body forms. So the one is the polyp. One is the polyp, the other is the medusa. So the organisms that belong to the phylum Cnidaria, they have two basic forms. In some of them, there might be a one predominant form. One may be like they mostly spend their life cycle in one dominant form. But basically, in overall, most of the cnidarians, they have two basic body forms. The one is the polyp and the other is the medusa. The mouth of a polyp is directed upwards, while the mouth of a jellyfish or medusa is directed downwards. So in polyp, you will see that the mouth is upwards, while in jellyfish or in the medusa, you will see, which is bell-shaped structure, you will see that the mouth is downwards. So the mouth of a polyp is directed upwards, while in the jellyfish or medusa, it is directed downwards. So the bell-shaped form is the medusa, has more mesoglea than a polyp. And the tentacles are concentrated on the margin of the bell. So the tentacles are present here on the margin of the bell. They have more mesoglea than the polyp, and they have more tentacles which are concentrated on the margin of the cell. At one time, both body forms may have been a part of the life cycle of cnidarians. So there might be a time when both the body forms are part of the life cycle, and that time the animal is dimorphic. So when both the forms are seen together, the animal is called the dimorphic. As the name suggests, di means two, morphic means two morphologies, right? So when at the same time it is having two morphologies, that is, one is of polyp and one is of medusa, the organism will be called as the dimorphic. There are certain differences, like first we see that the mouth of the polyp is directed upwards, while the mouth of the jellyfish or the medusa, if I'll say, is directed downwards. So this is one distinguishing feature. Second is the bell-shaped medusa has more mesoglea than polyp, and the tentacles are concentrated on the margin of the cells. Also, we will see that the polyps are mostly sessile, that is, they are fixed and they do not move. The sessile polyp stage produces medusa by asexual budding, and then the medusa, which is the motile in nature stage, produces egg and sperm. Right? So the polyp undergoes budding, while the medusa is usually undergoes sexual reproduction by producing the egg and sperm. So it is the reproductive stage. We will see how the reproduction happens in cnidarians. In some cnidarians, as I mentioned, one stage is dominant while the other is reduced. So in some cnidarians, one stage is dominant and the other is reduced. In other species, one form is absent altogether. As I mentioned, that in some, it might be possible that only one form exists throughout their life. While in some, one form may be dominant, the other may be reduced, while in some cnidarians, both the forms are seen equally. The exoskeleton of the coelentrates or the cnidarians is made up of calcium carbonate, example corals. So in corals are nothing but they are actually coelentrates or cnidarians, and their exoskeleton is really hard. It is made up of calcium carbonate. Respiration and excretion mainly takes place by the diffusion of gases to the body surfaces. They do not have any well-defined excretory or respiratory system, and the excretory material is ammonia. Right? So these are the basic features of the organisms that belong to the phylum coelentrates. So this is an example of how a polyp looks and how a medusa form looks. So we see that if I look at the polyp stage, firstly they are tubular, right? As we mentioned, they are tubular, and the medusa are bell-shaped, right? देख के समझ आ रहा है? That these are tubular in nature, tube-like structure है. This is a tube-like structure, right? While they are bell-shaped structures. They have bell-shaped structures, while polyps are tubular. And mouth or anus is present upward in this, while the mouth or anus, which is the same opening, is present downwards in this medusa. Mouth or anus is present downwards, while in this case, the mouth or anus is present upward. Right? The tentacles are mainly concentrated on the upper surface, while in this, the tentacles are mostly concentrated on the margins. They have gastrovascular cavity. Both of them have gastrovascular cavity. The outer layer is called the epidermis in both of them. The morphology is different, but the organization of the layers is same. So the outer layer is the epidermis in both of them. The inner layer will be endodermis in both of them, and the central layer is the mesoglea. So we can clearly see that the mesoglial part is more in case of medusa as compared to polyps. So in polyps, this is mesoglea, right? One which I am highlighting is mesoglea, which is shown here in very light color. So this is mesoglea. Fine. While in this case, this is mesoglea. So the mesoglial part is more in case of Medusa, as we discussed earlier also, that the mesoglia is more in case of medusal form. So the mesoglia is more. Then they have gastrovascular cavity, which performs the function of digestion and supplying the nutrients. Polyps are usually asexual. As I mentioned, they reproduce by the process of budding. By the budding, they give rise to medusa. They are mostly sessile, that is, they are mostly attached to the substrate. They remain attached to the substrate at the aboral end. So this is the aboral end where it remains attached to the substrate. So they remain attached to the substrate here. They are mostly sessile. Mouth facing up. So mouth faces up in these organisms. While in Medusa is dioecious and it is free swimming with mouth facing downwards. So dioecious means that both male and female are not present in same organism, but they are present in different organisms. That is, they are not hermaphrodite as compared to the poriferans. In poriferans, we see that poriferans are, so in poriferans, what we see was that they are monoecious, right? They are they were hermaphrodites. So they have both male and female in the same, but in this case they are dioecious. That is, they require two organisms, one that produces the female gamete, the one that produces the male gamete. So Medusa is dioecious, it is free swimming. So they are not sessile, but they are motile. So they are free swimming, they are motile, unlike polyp, and their mouth faces the downwards, as I mentioned. The Medusa has more mesoglia than polyp. This I have already mentioned, that it has more mesoglia than the polyp. So this is a basic structure of the polyp and the Medusa form. And these are the examples of the coelentrates indicating outline of their body form. So this you can clearly see. The first example here represents the Medusa Aurelia, which is also known as the Aurelia form. Aurelia, the Medusa is being shown here of the Aurelia. You can see that it has a bell-shaped structure, right? It has tentacles. It must be having mouth here in the downwards direction, right? And it is free swimming. You can clearly see it is free swimming, right? It swims freely. It is motile in nature. So this is an example. Aurelia is being shown here, which the predominant form in which it exists is the Medusa. While if I talk about the another example, which is the Adamsia, so the polyp of that organism is being shown. It is tubular. You can clearly see it has a tube-like structure. It is tubular. The tentacles are present near the mouth. It is being, so this is the mouth portion, mouth or the anus. You can say both are same. So this is the mouth or the anus, and it is being attached to the substrate. So these are attached to the substrate that helps in the attachment, and they are therefore sessile. They do not move, they are sessile, they are fixed, they are attached to the substrate. So these are the outlines of their body form which are being shown here. Said it is tubular, while it is bell-shaped. Right? This is the opening mouth of anus. This is the opening mouth of anus. So these are the examples. This is very important to remember. It is mentioned in the NCERT also that Aurelia exists in the Medusa form, while Adamsia, which is the polyp form, right? So the polyp form of Adamsia is being shown, and the Medusa form of Aurelia is shown here. So this is another example, Hydra, and anatomy of Hydra is being shown. So we can clearly see that in this figure, it has been shown the polyp form. So the body of a Hydra is a small tubular polyp. We can clearly see in the figure also. By the term polyp, we can, by seeing the figure only, we can see whether it is a polyp form or the Medusa form, right? And since it is polyp, it obviously it will undergo asexual reproduction, and it will form the new organism by the process of budding. So here you can see in this figure that the budding is, you can clearly see in this figure that the budding is shown. So the bud formation is being shown here. So these are the nerve nets. Nerve nets are the nervous system. So nervous system is present in the form of nerve nets. They have gastrovascular cavity. The upper part has the mouth or the anus, and these are the tentacles. Fine. It is being attached to the substrate at the aboral end. The body wall contains two tissue layers separated by mesoglea, and the cnidocytes are the cells that contains the nematocyst. So this we have already discussed about all the cnidarians. So this is similar for all the cnidarians, that the body cells are body wall consists of two tissue layers which is being separated by mesoglea, and the cnidocytes are the cells that contains the nematocyst. So the we can clearly see here the body wall is being shown, and the how the arrangement takes place here. So the mesoglea is the packing material that helps in the packing between the outer layer and the inner layer. Right? They have flagella. They have gastrovascular cavity that performs the function of digestion and supplies the nutrition. So these are the two tissue layers, outer layer and the inner layer, which is being separated by mesoglea, right? Then they have cnidocytes that contains the nematocyst. So if you will see the enlarged structure, if I zoom in this figure, so you can see that it is similar to what I draw. So they contains the nematocyst, and as and when the cnidocyte is triggered, this nematocyst came out of this cnidocyte cell, and it helps in attaching to the prey. So as and when this cnidocyte is triggered, this comes out and helps in catching the prey or releasing the toxins. They have sensory cells, they have gland cells, and their nervous system is known as the nerve net. Basically, they do not have well-defined nervous system. They have nerve nets that helps in the sensing the environment. This is the basic anatomy of Hydra, which is the polyform, which has a small tubular polyp structure, and it has two layers, as similar to all the cnidarians, which separated from each other with the help of which are, we can say, tightly packed with each other with the help of the packing material, which is the mesoglea. So this is the reproduction in the cnidarians. So we know that. So here we can see that this is the adult medusa. So they have mouth, they have feeding arms, they have reproductive organs, they have jelly. That is the mesoglea. So typically medusa is the sexually reproducing organ. So this is the adult medusa. It releases an egg. So basically medusa releases an egg that is fertilized by a free swimming sperm. So a free swimming sperm. So the fertilization is external. Unlike the poriferans, where the fertilization is in poriferans, we see that the fertilization is internal. The sperm is taken up with the water current inside the body, and is there the fertilization takes place. But in coelantrates, the egg is released outside and the fertilization is external. So the egg is being released outside, which is being fertilized by a free swimming sperm. So this is a fertilized egg which fertilizes into a zygote, and this zygote further developed into a blastula, which develops into the planula. So the planula is the larval stage, free swimming larval stage. So this is the larva. Planula. This is the larval stage, right? Which is the free swimming form. Free swimming larval stage. Since it involves a larval stage, it shows that it has an indirect development, right? Since the larval stage is involved in the formation of the organism, that means it is an indirect development. Fine. So these terms are important because these terms will keep on coming throughout these biology lectures. Whenever you will learn about reproduction, whenever you will learn about the different cycles or developmental stages in different organisms. So once you will get acquainted with these terms will help you a lot there. So by indirect fertilization, we means that by indirect development, we means that they have larval stage, which this larval stage is completely different from their adult, right? So we can see that the planula is not similar to polyp or medusa. So the planula is the larval stage, which is an elongated free swimming larva that attaches to a substrate, and then its interior cell. So it is a free swimming larva which then gets attached to the substrate, and then its interior cells divide itself or split to form the gastrovascular cavity, eventually developing into a polyp. So eventually it develops into a polyp. So this is how the transformation from medusa to polyp is taking place. So the polyp then eventually develops into the polyp, which eventually buds, and upon budding, it produces additional polyps and medusa buds. So the polyp may lead to the formation of another polyp, or it may result in the young medusa also. These young medusa then further develop into the adult medusa and leads to, and the same cycle continues. The medusa break free of the polyp and swims away because it is it is mobile, right? It can move. It is a free swimming stage. So this is how the reproduction takes place, and this is how the polyp to medusa transformation, or the vice versa, polyp to medusa transformation happens. Right? So examples of the organisms that belong to these phyla includes the sea anemones, cup coral, Portuguese man of war, which is the Physalia, and other example includes jellyfish. So other examples which are mentioned in the literature or in the NCERT is Physalia, the common name of which is Portuguese man of war. Another example is Adamsia, which is the sea anemone. Next is Penicula, which is sea pen. Gorgonia, sea fen. Meandrina,